the genesis of a killer. The crimson moons of Zarian 7 cast their bloody light across the military complex, where perfection was manufactured in the sterile halls of the Dominion's most secretive facility. Beings were created for one purpose, the complete elimination of humanity. Among these living weapons, none was more perfect than Nyx Valdrisat. 19 standard years, Nyx possessed the ethereal beauty of her celestial heritage combined with enhancements that made her deadlier than any natural-born warrior. Her silver hair flowed like liquid metal, and her violet eyes could see in spectrums beyond human comprehension. Every muscle fiber had been genetically optimized, every nerve, ending connected to combat algorithms that made her reactions faster than thought itself. Standing before the massive viewing window of the training complex, General Korath observed his greatest creation. With satisfaction, the towering reptilian commander's scales gleamed under the artificial lights as he watched Nyx demolish another wave of combat drones with fluid grace. Her movements were poetry written in violence, each strike calculated to maximize damage while conserving energy. Subject 77 shows remarkable progress, reported Dr. Voss, the facility's chief scientist. Her hatred indices for human targets have reached maximum levels. The psychological conditioning appears complete. Korath's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air. With anticipation, good tomorrow. She faces her final test. Real humans, real blood in her. Private chambers that night, Nyx sat in perfect meditation pose, her enhanced mind processing the combat scenario. She would face images of human faces flickered through her consciousness, each one triggering waves of manufactured disgust and rage. The genetic programming ran deep-coded into her very DNA. Humans were parasites, destroyers of worlds unworthy of existence. Yet somewhere in the depths of her engineered psyche, a tiny spark of something else flickered, curiosity perhaps, or doubt. She pushed the foreign sensation away, focusing on her purpose. She was the blade that would cut humanity from the galaxy. The captured storm. Captain Marcus Stone had been many things in his 32 years, explorer, soldier leader, and now prisoner chained in the Dominion's holding cells beneath Zarian 7's surface. He maintained the quiet dignity that had made him a legend among the human resistance. His dark hair was matted with dried blood, and his green eyes burned with unbroken defiance despite weeks of interrogation. The cell block housed 12 other human survivors from his destroyed ship, who looked to him for hope, even in their darkest hour. Among them was Jenna Cross, the ship's medic, whose gentle nature remained intact despite their circumstances. Her auburn hair caught what little light filtered through the energy barriers as she tended to the wounded with supplies she'd hidden in her medical kit. "They're planning something," whispered tech specialist Riley Park, her fingers nervously adjusting her broken glasses. "The guards have been different today, more excited." Marcus nodded grimly. He'd noticed it. Tooth alien guards spoke in their clicking language about the final test and the perfect hunter. Whatever was coming, it wouldn't be pleasant, as if summoned by their fears. The cell block's main doors hissed open. General Korath entered, his massive form filling the corridor. As he approached, their cells behind him walked a figure that made every human prisoner fall silent. Nyx moved with an otherworldly grace that seemed to defy gravity itself. Her silver hair flowed behind her like Abner of war, and her violet eyes scanned each prisoner with cold calculation. The skin-tight combat suit she wore highlighted every perfect curve of her engineered form, while the energy blade at her hip hummed with lethal promise. "Behold," Korath announced, his voice echoing through the chamber, "the instrument of your species. Extinction she was born to hate, you trained to kill, you and perfected to ensure not one human survives our cleansing of the galaxy." Nyx stepped forward, her enhanced senses cataloging every detail of the prisoners: heart rates, stress hormones, fear, pheromones. All the data confirmed what her programming demanded. These creatures were weak, pathetic, unworthy of continued existence. Her hand moved instinctively toward her weapon, but then her gaze met Marcus, eyes the crack imperfection. Something impossible happened in that moment of contact where Nyx expected to see the cowering fear of inferior beings. She found something else entirely. Marcus looked at her not with terror, but with sadness. Not the sadness of someone facing death, but the profound sadness of someone who recognized another's pain. "You're very young," he said softly, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. How long have they been hurting you? The words hit Nyx like a physical blow. In 19 years of existence, no one had ever suggested that her condition might be suffering. She was perfection, the ultimate expression of genetic engineering and combat training. Yet this human, this enemy, saw something else entirely. Her programming screamed warnings. This was manipulation, a desperate attempt to weaken her resolve. The hatred circuits in her brain fired rapidly, flooding her system with artificial rage, but underneath that manufactured emotion, something new stirred, something that felt strangely like recognition. I don't know what game you're playing, human, she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind, but it won't save you. Marcus smiled, and the expression transformed his battered features. I'm not playing any games. I'm just sorry that someone took a child and turned her into a weapon. That's not what children are meant to be. The other prisoners watched in stunned silence as their captor and their leader engaged in this impossible conversation. General Korath's scales bristled with irritation, but he remained silent, curious to see how his weapon would handle this psychological warfare. Nyx felt something crack inside, her chest like ice beginning to thaw. The sensation was terrifying and wonderful, all at once. I am not a child. I am a weapon. I am perfection. You're a person, Marcus said gently. Underneath all that engineering and conditioning, you're still a person, and every person deserves to choose their own path. The word choose resonated through Nyx's consciousness like a bell. Choice was not a concept that existed. In her world, everything was predetermined, programmed perfect. Yet here was this human suggesting that alternatives existed. Her enhanced hearing detected the rapid beating of her own heart, a sound that should have been impossible given her conditioning. The combat algorithms that usually filled her thoughts seemed muted, replaced by questions she'd never been designed to ask. Who was she beyond her programming? What did she want beyond what she'd been created to want? And why did this human's pain seem to call to something deep within her engineered soul, the seeds of doubt? Enough, General Korath finally declared, his patience wearing thin. You will have time to study your prey tomorrow. My dear, tonight, they rest before their execution. As the alien commander turned to leave, Nyx found herself lingering. Her violet eyes remained locked with Marcus's green ones, both of them seeming to communicate something beyond words. The other prisoners watched this exchange with growing hope, sensing that something significant was occurring. What's your name? Marcus asked quietly. I am Designation 77, she replied automatically, then hesitated. But they call me Nyx. That's a beautiful name in human mythology. Nyx was the goddess of the night, powerful, mysterious, but not evil, just misunderstood. The comparison sent triples through her consciousness. Powerful, yes. Mysterious? Certainly, but, Avil, was that what she was? The question felt like a virus in her perfect mental architecture, spreading doubt through systems designed never to question. It should kill you now, she whispered, though her hand made no move toward her weapon. But you won't, Marcus replied with certainty that surprised them both, because somewhere inside all that perfection there's still a part of you that knows right from wrong, and you know this is wrong. As Nyx finally turned to leave following General Korath from the cell block, she felt the first real emotion of her existence, confusion. The genetic programming that had governed every moment of her life seemed suddenly fragile, like a spider's web, touched by morning dew. That night, alone in her chambers, Nyx stared at her reflection in the polished metal wall. The face that looked back was flawless, designed to be the ultimate expression of deadly beauty. But behind those violet eyes she saw something new, stirring, something that looked almost like hope. Outside her window, the crimson moons of Zarian 7 continued their eternal dance, casting their light on a world where the impossible was beginning to seem possible, where a weapon designed to destroy might choose instead to protect, where hatred might transform into something far more powerful, where love might bloom in the most unlikely of hearts. The perfect weapon had encountered the one thing her creators never anticipated: genuine human compassion. And in that moment of unexpected kindness, the first crack appeared in a conditioning meant to last forever. Tomorrow would bring the test that would determine not just the fate of 13 human prisoners, but the destiny of two species whose futures had suddenly become intertwined. The weapon had met her target, but in doing So she had discovered something her creators never intended. The weight of choice dawn on Zarian 7 arrived with the harsh glare of twin suns cutting through. The artificial atmosphere of the military complex Nyx had not slept. Instead, she had spent the night staring at her ceiling, replaying every moment of her encounter with the human captain. The confusion that had taken root in her mind now spread like wildfire through her carefully constructed mental framework standing before her mirror. She practiced the expressions that had been drilled into her since childhood. Cold indifference, calculated, hatred, predatory satisfaction. But each time she tried to summon the familiar emotions, Marcus's words echoed in her consciousness. "You're still a person." The morning briefing took place in General Korath's private chamber, a space designed to intimidate with its collection of weapons from conquered worlds. The reptilian commander's yellow eyes studied his creation with growing concern as she stood at perfect attention before his desk. "Your biometric readings were irregular last night," he stated, his forked tongue testing the air. The medical scanners detected elevated heart rate, increased neural activity in sectors that should remain dormant. Explain. Nyx had anticipated this question. Her enhanced intellect had already formulated 17 different responses, each designed to deflect suspicion. Yet when she opened her mouth, something unexpected emerged. "I was analyzing optimal kill strategies for today's test." She lied smoothly, though part of her recoiled at the deception. The human captain presents unique psychological challenges that require additional consideration. Korath's scales rippled with what might have been approval. "Indeed, Marcus Stone is legendary among their kind. Breaking him publicly will send a message across human space that even their greatest heroes are powerless against our superiority." The casual mention of Marcus's reputation sent an unexpected pang through Nyx's chest. She had been created to feel nothing for enemy combatants except professional interest in their destruction. This new sensation was both terrifying and strangely compelling. "I will not disappoint you," General, she replied. Though the words felt like ash in her mouth as she prepared to leave, Korath's voice stopped her. "Remember, my dear weapon, you are the culmination of centuries of genetic engineering and psychological conditioning. You are perfect because you feel nothing for inferior species. Do not let their desperate words poison your clarity of purpose." The T warning hit closer to home than Nyx cared to admit. She nodded curtly and strode from the chamber, her mind racing with implications. She was only beginning to understand the underground network in the depths of the prison complex the human captives had spent their final night in very different ways. While some prayed to distant gods and others wrote final messages they would never send, Marcus Stone had been planning. Jenna Cross knelt beside him as he sketched patterns in the dust with his finger, her medical training making her invaluable in reading the subtle signs of their captors' routines. Her gentle features were drawn with exhaustion, but her brown eyes remained sharp with intelligence. "The guard rotation changes at the third bell," she whispered, pointing to his crude map. "And there's something else, Marcus, the way that girl looked at you yesterday. I've seen that expression before." Marcus paused in his sketching. "What do you mean?" "In my medical training, I worked with children who'd been traumatized, severely abused cases, where they'd learned to shut down emotionally just to survive." The look in her eyes wasn't hatred, Marcus, it was recognition, like she saw something in you that she's been missing in herself. Riley Park adjusted her broken glasses and leaned closer. "You think she might help us? She's their ultimate weapon, Jenna. Even if she wanted to, which she doesn't, the programming would stop her. Programming can be broken," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won experience. "I've seen it happen when people are forced to become something they're not. There's always a part of their true self that survives. Sometimes it just takes the right catalyst to bring it to the surface." The conversation was interrupted by the familiar hiss of energy barriers deactivating, but instead of the usual contingent of guards, a single figure stepped into the cell block. Nyx moved through the shadows like a ghost, her enhanced form barely disturbing the air. Around her she approached Marcus's cell with predatory grace, yet something in her posture seemed different, less certain, more human. "I came to study you before tomorrow's execution," she announced, though her voice lacked the cold confidence of the previous day, to understand how humans face death. Marcus rose slowly, mindful of the energy shackles that bound his wrists. Is that really why you're here? Nyx, the use of her chosen name rather than her designation, sent a visible tremor through her frame for a moment. The perfect mask slipped, revealing something vulnerable underneath. I don't understand what's happening to me, she whispered so quietly that only Marcus could hear. Since yesterday, the thoughts won't stop questions. I was never designed to ask feelings. I was never meant to feel the awakening heart. Jenna watched the exchange with growing amazement. The deadly weapon who had entered their prison was transforming before their eyes into something achingly young and lost. The medical part of her brain cataloged the signs: defensive posturing, giving way to open vulnerability; rigid control, softening into genuine emotion; artificial hatred cracking to reveal authentic pain. What kind of questions? Marcus asked gently, stepping as close to the energy barrier as safety. Aloud, Nyx's violet eyes met his through the crackling field. Why do I dream of skies I've never seen? Why does music make my chest feel tight in ways that have nothing to do with combat preparation? Why do I look at flowers in the biodome and wish I could understand their purpose beyond oxygen production? The other prisoners listened in stunned silence as their captor revealed the depths of her confusion. This was not the calculating predator they had expected, but a young woman discovering her own humanity for the first time. Because you're waking up, Marcus said softly. All that conditioning, all that programming, it can suppress your natural self, but it can't destroy it completely. You're remembering who you were meant to be. I don't know who that is. Nyx admitted, her perfect composure finally cracking. Everything. I know. Everything. I am. It's all been decided for me. I don't even know what I would choose if I had the freedom to choose. Then start small. Jenna suggested, her medic's instincts taking over. What's the first thing you can remember wanting for yourself? Not for your mission or your creators, but just for you. Nyx was quiet for a long moment, her enhanced mind sifting through years of suppressed memories. When she spoke, her voice carried the wonder of rediscovery. There was a garden in the residential sector when I was very young. Before the final modifications, I used to sneak away from training to watch the sunrise through the leaves, the way the light filtered through the green. It made me feel peaceful. I didn't understand why they took that away. They took it away because peace doesn't serve their purpose, Marcus said, his voice heavy with understanding. But that feeling, that capacity for beauty and wonder, it's still there. It's part of who you really are. The sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor sent Nyx into immediate combat readiness. Her posture shifted, becoming once again the perfect weapon as Vex, her primary handler, appeared at the cell block entrance. The alien's insectoid features were unreadable, but his multi-aceted eyes missed nothing. As they swept over the scene, the general requires your presence. Designation 77, final preparations for tomorrow's demonstration. Nyx nodded curtly, but as she turned to leave, she caught Marcus's eye one final time. In that brief moment, something passed. Between them, an understanding, a promise, a recognition of possibilities neither had dared imagine. The point of no return. The final briefing took place in the complex's main amphitheater, where tomorrow's execution would be broadcast across the galaxy. General Korath stood before a holographic display showing the layout of the ceremony, his voice carrying the satisfaction of anticipated victory. The humans will be brought in at dawn, he explained to the assembled officers. Designation 77 will demonstrate the superiority of our genetic engineering by dispatching them one by one, saving their leader. For last, the psychological impact will be invaluable. Nyx stood among the other weapons, for that's what they all were. She realized with growing horror, living beings reduced to instruments of war, their capacity for choice and growth stripped away in the name of efficiency and control. As the briefing continued, she found her attention drifting to the viewing ports that showed the stars beyond Sirian 7 somewhere. Out there were worlds she had never seen, people she had never met. Possibilities she had never considered for the first time in her existence. The universe seemed vast with potential, rather than targets to be eliminated. Designation 77, General Korath's voice cut through her reverie. You seem distracted. Perhaps you require additional conditioning before tomorrow's ceremony. The threat was clear: one word from her, one sign of hesitation, and she would be returned to the programming chambers where her nent humanity would be burned away forever. She thought of Marcus's words about choice, about the part of herself that her creators couldn't destroy. No additional conditioning required, General. She replied with perfect composure, "I am ready to fulfill my purpose." But even as she spoke the words, Nyx knew they were no longer true. Her purpose, her real purpose, was beginning to crystallize in her mind, not as a weapon of destruction, but as something far more dangerous to the Dominion's plans. A catalyst for change. As the briefing concluded and the assembled officers dispersed, Nyx remained behind, staring at the holographic display of tomorrow's execution chamber. In less than 12 hours, she would stand in that space and make a choice that would determine not just the fate of 13 human prisoners, but the trajectory of her own existence. The perfect weapon was about to discover that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't hatred or fear, or even perfectly engineered genetics. It was love, and love, once awakened, was impossible to destroy. The crimson moons of Zarian 7 began their nightly ascent, casting their light on a world where everything was about to change. In her quarters, Nyx sat by her window and watched the stars, dreaming of gardens and sunrise and the freedom to choose her own path. Tomorrow would bring the test that would define her forever. But tonight, for the first time in her existence, she dared to hope the hour of truth. The execution amphitheater on Zarian 7 had been designed to inspire terror. Carved from black volcanic stone and surrounded by towering energy pylons, it could hold 50 0 spectators while broadcasting to billions more across the galaxy. As dawn broke over the military complex, representatives from dozens of conquered worlds filed into the seats, forced witnesses to what General Korath promised would be the beginning of humanity's final chapter. Nyx stood in the preparation chamber beneath the arena, her reflection multiplied infinitely in the polished metal walls. The ceremonial armor they had given her was a masterpiece of intimidation: sleek black plates that enhanced her already perfect form, energy conduits that pulsed with deadly light, and a helmet designed to hide any trace of humanity in her features. But she had chosen not to wear the helmet. Second thoughts are not permitted. Vex observed his insectoid features unreadable as he made final adjustments to her weapon systems. "The conditioning protocols have been verified. Your hatred indices are at maximum efficiency." Nyx nodded silently, though inside her mind a very different reality was taking shape. The hatred indices were lies, numbers, manipulated by systems that couldn't measure what they had never been designed to recognize. What burned in her chest now wasn't hatred at all, but something far more powerful and infinitely more dangerous to everything. The Dominion represented above them. The crowd's roar echoed through the stone corridors as General Korath began his opening address. His voice, amplified by neural broadcasters, reached every corner of Dominion space. "Today marks the dawn of a new era," he declared, his reptilian form imposing against the backdrop of captured human banners. "Today, we demonstrate that even the most legendary of human heroes is nothing before our genetic perfection in the holding cells adjacent